You're listening to Kitchen Table Finance. Join Dave Shotwell and Nick Nauta as they cut through the complexity of financial planning and serve bites of investment advice that are both personal and practical.
Hey Dave, how you doing today?
Not bad, Nick. How are you?
A beautiful summer day.
It
Probably
is
a little hot for you northerners, but
we
like it down south.
Yeah, when I start seeing 80 consistently on the thermometer, I start thinking about Manitoba. And,
yeah,
you know,
moving further north.
Yeah, someplace between here and the Arctic Circle, but that's all right. I'll be all right.
To each their own, I guess. So today's topic is kind of an extension of an earlier podcast that we did on the book review of The Soul of Money.
Yes.
And kind of the underlying topic, Dave, is how to make yourself heard with the voice of money. And kind of what we mean by that is we all make a conscious or I guess and sometimes unconscious decision on how we spend our money. Meaning, right. You know, where we purchase things from, what we do with the money that we have, the excess, the discretionary money, right?
Right.
And so if it is truly your goal to make sure that your money is going to things that you support, there's some tips on how to think about that and maybe also some financial tips on the best way to potentially do that. So I thought that would be a good topic for us to kind of go over how you might look at that and some financial strategies for getting that done.
Right. Yeah. And, to reiterate something we've said before, when we look at someone's budget, you can really see what their priorities are because how you spend your money really is a reflection of your priorities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one of the things about this day and age is everything is so easy and accessible. It is rare for us to just stop and take a second and think about where am I purchasing this? Where is this actual purchase coming from? Right? Like, what is this? What are my dollars doing here? And is that important to me? And for some people, maybe it's not, right? And so that's why we have a couple of different strategies where you might gravitate to one and say, hey, I really want to do this. I don't really care about, where I necessarily buy things from. I'm cool with Amazon and the monster that they are. And you might have other people that say, I really want to be more conscious about, purchasing things through something like Amazon or Walmart or whatever it is.
Etsy or at the local farmer's market. Right.
Whatever doesn't match your values, and you get to choose. That's the unique thing about this is everybody's values are different and everybody prioritizes them different. And so these are just some interesting ways for how to get some of that stuff done so that you feel better about the use of your money and you are the only one that can make that decision.
Exactly.
So the first one on our list, Dave, is just being financially generous, right? And when we talk about this, we're talking about giving money away, right? And that can come in a lot of different forms. The one that we run into the most is I want to make a charitable contribution, right?
Yes.
And so there's a couple different financial ways to do that. But I think before even looking that far, I think what a lot of people maybe miss sometimes is doing your research and figuring out like, where is this money going? And is it going to be doing what I want it to do? Right. Like because the US is so charitable, it's an easy place for people to kind of take a look at and take advantage of the system in terms of like the thing I think of is everybody's seen the commercials with the starving dog and, giving money to, nobody wants the dog to starve. Right. And so they're pulling on those emotional strings and and I'm not saying that that's a bad organization because I personally have never done the research, but if that's something that I'm thinking and strongly considering, there's probably a plethora of different options to support said dog. And figuring out what's going to be the best one is probably a great first step of that. And so some of the resources that we've directed clients to and kind of helped them with in the past is there's something called Charity Navigator, which is a website that will kind of give you detailed information on that particular organization.
Yeah, and it scores all the major national charitable organizations and how they utilize their money. Is most of your money going to pay a exorbitant salary to an executive director? Is it going to print glossy brochures, or are they putting it to work doing things that their name says they do?
Right.
So yeah, and there's a wide variety, and none of them are perfect, but it kind of gives you an idea of how they're going to utilize your money and can give you a little more confidence before you make that gift.
Yeah, so on the national scale, that's, obviously, like we said, a lot of those big national ones are going to be on something like a Charity Navigator. If you're looking on a local scale, it becomes a little bit more difficult. Although, if you're running a 501c3, and that would be like my first question is, how are you organized? And then, usually all those 501c3s have to have like public records of their financials. So you should be able to get a financial report on where they were in the last couple of years.
On the local level too, you can meet with board members. That's when I was on the board of directors for the local Habitat for Humanity chapter for a number of years and served as president for a while. And it was pretty common for us to get sizable donations from people, but they would meet with us first and talk to us about how we were going to use that money or those resources that they were looking to donate. That was an important part of the whole project.
Yeah. So another resource that I would say is take a look at your local community foundation, right? So every town, not every small town, but every area generally has a community foundation, right? So for example, Lansing has the Capital Regional Community Foundation.
Yeah. Up north, there's the Straits area Community Foundation. Yep.
And so they have an in-depth knowledge of a lot of the local charities, and they can also kind of help you figure out, okay, do you want restrictions on your donation, and can help you through kind of that process on a bigger scale of like contributing to a foundation, starting your own foundation, which might be overkill for a lot of people, but they definitely have resources and can kind of point you in the right direction as far as local charities and how that all works.
Right.
So another area that you can check into. So beyond the, researching the charities, there's some different financial strategies that might make sense as well. And a lot of that comes down to taxes, right, Dave?
Yes. Yeah. With so many things we tell clients, you tell us what you want to do and we'll figure out the best way for you to do it. Right.
Right. Yeah.
And for the vast majority of what we've done over the last few years for clients in regards to charitable giving has been what are called qualified charitable distributions for folks over age 70 and a half. And essentially you can give money directly from your IRA to a charitable organization as long as it's a 501c3, which is going to cover churches and pretty much any legitimate nonprofit you can think of, other than like political action committees and lobbyists don't count, those kind of things, campaigns. But essentially, what that does is it gets you around the need to itemize on your taxes. Because essentially by having the money go directly from the IRA to the charity, you don't have to recognize it as income at all. So it's great in this world where the standard deduction on our taxes has gotten high enough that it's difficult for people to give away enough to get any tax benefit from it otherwise.
Right.
So
it's like 85% of people now don't itemize or something along those lines.
Right. And unless you're giving away a lot of money, that's probably not going to in and of itself be enough to get you over that hurdle. So not necessarily a bad thing, but it just means we have to be a little more strategic about how we can get tax advantages from gifts.
Yep. Another strategy along those lines as well is, charitable giving is still tax deductible, but the deal is it's part of your itemized deductions. And so you have to be over a certain threshold. So if you're close to that threshold, what a lot of people will do is if you have planned annual giving, you might do what's called batching, which is you might give 2 years worth in 1 year by doing, upfront in January and then December of the following year. So it's not really a burden on you other than maybe a couple of days, but it might help out more in the tax realm of having a bigger donation so that you can actually itemize and use those in one given year.
Yeah. Yeah. Another good strategy, if you're not old enough to do qualified charitable distributions, or the batching strategy won't work, some people will have appreciated assets that they've held for a long time, like maybe some stock that you bought years ago at a low cost basis. And now if you sold it, you would have to pay considerable capital gains on it. Well, just about every charity out there, including, small local ones, are going to have an account set up at a brokerage firm where you can gift them shares of stock instead of dollars. Mm-hmm. And what that does is you don't sell the stock and realize the capital gain. You let the charity sell the stock and realize the capital gain, because the charity doesn't pay taxes on the gain. Mm-hmm. So you're saving yourself the capital gains rates. The charity's getting the same dollar cost or, dollar amount donation, most likely, that you would have given anyway. And they certainly don't mind taking care of the stock.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're a great strategy for giving and just kind of making sure that you're aware of how that works and how it can benefit you and the charity in the long run, right? Mm-hmm. And then the last one kind of on our list that we have for today, at least, is donor advised funds.
Right. And there you're donating money into an account that is under the auspices of a foundation, usually a 501c3 foundation, where you still control the account and control the investments, but you make a contribution, say $25,000 all in 1 year, take the deduction for that, and then you make grants from it over your lifetime to charities. You don't deduct them at the time you give the money to the charities. You deduct the money at the time you put it in the fund.
Yep.
So it's another way to get over it. It's essentially the same strategy as batching, mm-hmm. and moving all of your contributions for several years into 1 year this way.
Yeah, and just allows you to, kind of spread that money out how you see fit over time, but mm-hmm. also get the best, tax deduction potentially by doing it that way. And, yeah. And one thing that I guess we didn't really bring up is, these are strategies to save on taxes, but if you find that your civic duty is to pay those taxes, then maybe you don't worry about these things, right?
Yeah. Yep. I've actually had a client tell me that he wasn't worried about saving on taxes for those reasons. So
there you go. So kind of the second way, I guess, where you can use your money to kind of support your values is by making a conscious effort to use the money more ethically. Now, ethically can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, so we're not going to try to describe that. But the first thing that comes to mind with this, Dave, is there is something called ESG investing, and there's actually also a lot of more. So ESG is environmental, social, and governance, right? So we're basically screening companies that meet these qualifications. But there's also a lot of other things that you can screen for as well, depending on how you want to do it. So you could screen for, like, I don't want to invest in a company that, supports abortion or whatever it is that your value is. There's a lot of different ways to screen those things now. So it doesn't necessarily have to be ESG, although that's the one you usually hear the most about is ESG investing.
Yeah, and it's become a bit of a controversial topic over the last year. It's kind of a growing industry in an area, and anytime, there's changes like this, it's kind of a pendulum action where you get pushed back. And so there's a lot of discussion around the concept right now. But as you said, there's a lot of different ways to get it done. So just be aware that those things are out there. And again, a lot of times it's a matter of us saying to the client, you tell us what your goal is, and we'll help you figure out the right strategy to get you there.
Yeah, absolutely. And without going into too much detail about ESG, we actually did, what was it, last year, I think, where we had Apollo come in and did just a phenomenal presentation on ESG. So we'll put a link to that video in the show notes to share with people if they're interested in more of the granular details of how that would work. But that's certainly a way that you can, just be conscious of, the companies that you invest in, and that, ethically or how you want to screen companies at this point is kind of up to you. We're seeing a lot more advancements in what you're able to do in portfolios now.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it's becoming, technology has made it a lot more cost effective for smaller investors to get more granular about what's in the portfolio.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
But in a broader sense, just think about how you spend money and who you support, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
If you mentioned Amazon, earlier, if keeping things local is a goal of yours, if you want to, you're going to pay a little bit more to support local businesses, most likely, but that has its upside too. You support your community; those people, maybe they're your customers for something else.
Mm-hmm.
I think back to, it's probably 20 years ago now. There used to be bumper stickers you'd see in Southern Michigan that said, "I work for Ford and I drive a Ford." Right.
Yeah.
And, kind of a slogan built on that same concept. Like, it's important to me to support the company that I work for so that, and we're kind of all in this together. But, I listen to people complain about how, vacant Main Street is, yet they're shopping at Walmart, So, we can't have it both ways. We can't complain that nothing's made in America anymore when at the same time we want the cheapest stuff we can get.
Right. As fast as we can get it.
Right. So, you can't have it both ways. And, the economy is made up of millions and millions of decisions made every day by 300 and some million people in this country, right?
Right.
If we all vote with our dollars, if we were more conscious about it, like you said in the beginning, things would look a little bit different,
Yeah, absolutely.
It's tough because it's always like back, like it's one of those, you don't realize what you had until it's gone kind of things. Like we're not going to reinvent the American textile industry at this point. Your t-shirts are still going to come from Bangladesh and Vietnam or, wherever. That's just the way it is now. But think about that with things you can still buy local or buy American made if that's important to you.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I think that, just being conscious about that and doing your research, obviously a lot of people like to shop online, but, there's the benefit of online commerce is that you can do a lot of research on the companies that you buy from. So, if it's a global brand, research their presence, check out their policy page, look at their, from trustworthy external sources, if that's something that you're worried about. So, shopping local and having those conversations with people, but also as you're, looking for convenience and getting things online, there's a good way to go about vetting some of these companies and making sure that you're comfortable with how they're producing these goods and what that all looks like. And I think that's become more important for a lot of companies as well, as we see that kind of push towards local, smaller businesses and companies larger companies kind of not necessarily jumping on the bandwagon, but being aware of that and trying to be more sustainable or trying to do things a way that consumers would appreciate. So,
yeah, for sure.
The third thing on our list, Dave, is devote ourselves to public service. And so what we mean by that is giving back your time. So we talked about, being generous with charities, but a lot of these local charities are clamoring for volunteers right now and really Big can't time. Find people. So it's another way to get involved. I know, so I've been recently gotten off of two different boards. One, the Davies Project, which has volunteer drivers at their whole volunteer force. They're always looking for more drivers. And then the homeless shelter that I was on the board of has a lot of different needs, but the main one was just having people there when the guests were there. They actually had to go out and hire people to do a lot of those shifts because they couldn't find the volunteers anymore. So that's every single one of these companies, these nonprofits usually have volunteer opportunities that are available right now. Yeah. I don't know any of them that are turning people away.
Yeah. And usually a broad variety of expertise needed if you look around.
Right.
So, yeah, get involved
or even
for sure.
serving on a board, right? Almost all of these nonprofits are looking for board members too. So you might have a, experience in whatever that they're looking for. A lot of them are looking for certain different experience levels. So depending on your background, you might be a great fit to serve on a board or a committee. As far as financial strategies for that goes, obviously keeping track of any donations that you make, but also mileage, I believe, is still something that you can track and write off, depending on obviously whether you're itemizing or not. So it's much of a smaller thing. So you'd really have to be
valuable now, but
not necessarily as valuable, but certainly something that, if you're driving for a company and you're not getting reimbursed for that, that might start to add up after a while.
Right. Well, and we should mention, I think we missed it earlier, but you are able to deduct $300 a year per taxpayer. So married filing jointly would get $600 a year of cash donations without itemizing.
Yep, as a part of the CARES Act for the last couple of years.
Yeah, kind of goes in this section too. But if you're supporting a board, if you're on a board of directors, you're probably going to be expected to make some monetary commitments too. So yes, I always was, which is fine. It's good, right?
Yeah,
but do keep track of at least $300 a year or $600 a year if you file jointly of cash donations, even if you don't itemize.
Yep, absolutely. And then the fourth one on our list, Dave, is to become an advocate for socially responsible public spending by government on health, education, safety, anything else that's important to you. And kind of the note that I took from this was get involved in local politics.
And vote.
And vote. Yes. Number one for sure is vote.
I could talk for the rest of the day about, what I see as some of the political ills of this country right now. But I honestly believe that if voter participation got into a reasonable realm of voter turnout, we'd have very different and very much more appealing outcomes.
Yeah.
if we could get to like 60% or 70% voter turnout consistently, this country would feel and look a lot different and a lot better to most people.
Yeah, for sure. So this is one of those where it's, we all complain about government, but very few of us actually step up and, try to get involved. And I think it's especially important on the local level because you can make a big difference on a local election where, the voting population is much less, and it impacts you much more.
But it impacts you directly, right?
Right, exactly.
Right. So it is funny because it's inversely, like voter turnout tends to be the best in a presidential election where your vote is probably the least meaningful. And as much as we like to focus on the president for good, bad, or indifferent reasons, it doesn't have nearly as much impact on your actual life as probably who's on your county road commission or your school board, right? So
absolutely,
where we're talking hundreds of votes makes a big campaign. So get out there, and think about local. And that's something I should probably be better about too. But that is a kind of an ironic truism of American politics.
Indeed. So some other final kind of considerations that you could think of as well. One of them is how you earn your money, right? Choosing work that's consistent with your values. It's not, sometimes that's easier said than done in a lot of ways, but if you're not happy with kind of the direction your company's going or the things that they're doing or producing or how they're doing or producing them, maybe that's something to consider and think about, is this really in line with my values? And that's a big struggle for someone who's, making money at maybe a way that they don't want, that they're not comfortable with.
Yeah. And it can be easier said than done, but, I know it's not always easy for people to contemplate changing a job just because they don't agree with corporate policy. But Yeah. Something to keep in mind.
Yeah. Or, try to be a voice of making a change in
Make
your company
change.
too,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't necessarily mean you have to quit your job, but maybe you try to take on a different role and get things changed into, more palatable direction, if you will. Another one, how you choose to provide food, clothing, shelter, and education for your family. We've got a lot more choice in those things right now, and being intentional about those and thinking about those. We talked a little bit about, local farmers markets and things like that, and advocating for healthy, fresh fruits and vegetables from local farmers is super important. And it's one of those things, if you don't support them, then they'll stop existing.
So they won't be there. Right. Right.
So making a conscious effort for that. And just, how money that you use to power your own creativity and self-expression. I think of this in terms of just investing in yourself, right? Like, how are you going to use your time, your talents, and your treasures to be creative and be self-expression and to make that an impactful, important part of your lives, I think is another thing you could look at. And then, if you're an employer, the money you invest into the resources to make your workplace an expression of your values. Obviously, that's an important to you and I, Dave. Especially when it comes to the financial planning industry, in terms of, how we see it and how we advocate for being fee-only fiduciary planners and trying to get the entire financial advice industry on the same page. Is super important to us.
And we're pretty committed through memberships in some associations that support that, and they advocate and lobby on our behalf on those things that we believe in as part of the greater public good. But also just on a corporate policy level, we believe in providing a flexible work environment and allowing each of us to work from home when needed and have some flex time and scheduling built around that, those kind of things. And then the commitment to one thing I'm proud of that you and we've done as a team has been committed to trying to educate young planners to go out and help improve the industry too.
Yeah, absolutely. From our internship program to, we brought Ashley on as an associate advisor and kind of designed a training education program for her to get her CFP and to really kind of have a much better introduction into this business than maybe you or I did, and hope to be able to continue stuff like that in the future and just bring along that next generation. And, as a company, we're always trying to improve, and we have a great education policy on certificates and training and making sure that's an important part. And what I would also say as well is always trying to educate, in just financial education, and kind of going out of our way to help people that maybe aren't clients, but, young professionals and people that need some of that financial education. We're always willing to kind of sit down and help them out and give them some guidance when they're just getting started.
Yeah.
So I think that about wraps it up, Dave. Hopefully this has been helpful to our listeners to just think about some of the ways that you're spending money, and maybe taking one or two of these and making it a priority in your lives to kind of align how you utilize your money with your values and what's most important to you. And that typically tends to, increase your relationship with money and, your happiness levels in a lot of ways. So I would definitely recommend, if you're thinking about some of these things, to try them out and see how it goes and see how you feel. As always, if our listeners have questions about these strategies or anything else, feel free to email us at info@srbadvisors.com. But it's been a pleasure, Dave.
Good stuff, Nick. Thanks.
This is a Zedia Media production.